You did everything you could to avoid it. You thought, okay, I'm going to hire people and set these clear expectations and we're going to do great work. And all of a sudden, you ask someone to do something and they kind of slack on it. Or you give feedback and they're like, whoa, I don't really need to do that. Or you're getting texted at all hours of the day with people's excuses about their dentist appointment and their yoga class and then why they can't finish something. And you realize that against all your best judgment, you are friend zoned by your team members. Now, this is something that happens to all of us leaders who are maybe a little bit people pleasing or want to be friendly and in relationships with our team members. It's completely natural, especially if you have a smaller team, right? You're all sitting together, you're meeting all the time, and it would be awesome if we could all just be a group of friends. But what's not so awesome is when you have to be the boss and give the hard feedback or hold people accountable and they look at you like, come on, dude, like we're just out here having beers. The truth is, as a leader, as the boss, you aren't friends with your team members. And you can absolutely be friendly. You can care deeply about them and their families and their lives. But as the boss, there has to be a bit of a boundary there. And that's what we're going to talk about on today's show. What do you do if you wake up one day and you realize, oh God, yep, I am friend zoned hardcore by my team and I got to figure this out. Now, what are some of the tells that you're in the friend zone? Well, I mentioned a few of them. One of the big ones is folks are coming to you with all their little excusey things that probably if they had a corporate job or a job where they didn't think of the boss as a friend, they wouldn't do that. So that is when maybe they're not honoring the work from office policy. Or when, you have it, they're always asking for edge cases. Maybe it's, them texting you and saying, oh, I had this thing come up, or, I've got that thing going on, where it's not a medical issue or a childcare thing. It's something like, I had that yoga class. I've been really trying to get in with that new teacher. And it's like, this is not really a work issue. And they're trying to like miss an important meeting or something like that. Something that you really would make an excuse about breaking off with a friend plan, not work. And a lot of times it looks like a real resistance to feedback because we're not used to getting feedback from our friends about things that we're not doing well. And now this is with constructive feedback specifically. So if you're nodding along like yes, yes, and yes, all of the above, I'm in the friend zone. Is it too late for me? What do I do? Well, first of all, no, it is not too late. You can always fix any of the challenges, anything that we talk about this show. We're talking about it because it's fixable. But we have to do it with intentionality, and we actually have to shift and rebuild the relationship that we have with our teams. And that might be a little bit awkward. Like we're probably in the friend zone in the first place because we don't really want to have conflict. We don't like having awkward conversations. Feedback's uncomfortable when someone gets defensive, so we avoid it. Or we know the team members that we really can't give feedback to versus others. So we've kind of categorized folks in these buckets, and everyone's just kind of thinks like, oh yeah, like she's cool, he's cool, they're cool, whatever. I can do this. And your team members don't. I would say, let's give them the benefit of the doubt and think they're not trying to take advantage of you. They're not doing this to get one over, but they're reading the cues that you're sending. And if you are signaling, I don't have a ton of boundaries, or I'm flexible with stuff, or you've never established that, then it is time to reset those signals. But this doesn't mean you have to be like, okay, now I'm the boss now. Like, wow, listen to me, because that's going to throw people off a lot. And they might leave if you turn into another person, or they might feel like, well, this isn't the environment I wanted to come to, or this is, who are you right now? So it's a course correction that's not a blindsiding. And there's a few things that I think are critical to do when we find ourselves in the friend zone. The first one is to talk about your leadership style, like put it out there in the open. And this can feel a little bit awkward, like as a leader, I like to do this, but no, that's not what we're talking about, right? This is real talk. So we can talk. It is saying, hey, I've been reflecting on what's really important to me as a leader and how I show up, and I'd like to share that with you. And I'd like to understand, how you like to have feedback, and so that we can figure out, the dynamics of when we have to have a hard conversation. How can we do that respectfully? If I have to share constructive feedback, what works for you? Simply by having this conversation, you are putting it out there like, yeah, we have a different relationship. We're not just hanging out like on the back patio having beers, right? We are in a different situation. So literally talking about your leadership style. This is what I am excited about as a leader. This is some of the challenges I'm working with through. Maybe it's saying, I struggle with giving direct feedback because I want everyone to feel, always super positive with their work. And that's something I'm reframing for myself. Saying whatever you're feeling stuck with and naming it, this doesn't weaken your credibility as a leader. This strengthens it. And by virtue of having the conversation, this is a 2-for-1. You are asserting yourself as the leader. I'm the leader. These are the characteristics. I am asking you to have this conversation. I'm inviting you into this. And you're resetting because this is not a conversation you'd have with your friends. So you're starting to shift the dynamic. And these conversations are extremely, extremely helpful and critical if you are managing folks that you had worked with more in a peer's capacity or a friend's capacity. Maybe you have hired someone very personally, small business owners, maybe you've hired a family member. We've got to reset this dynamic completely with folks that we know well, because the relationship that we have outside of work is completely different than the one we have inside. They can both be fantastic, beautiful relationships, but they're not the same. So resetting and having a conversation about, this is my leadership style. Here's how I like to give feedback. How do you like to have hard conversations? Let's talk about this. Let's get it on the table. How do you like to receive recognition and praise? We don't know that either in this new capacity. And that is going to go such a long way to starting to reset. Okay, so that's our step one. We've reset, we've named the dynamic change. Now our second step is to actually hold some boundaries. We might hold boundaries where we don't go to lunch with a team every day, or we don't go out with everyone to the bars after the Christmas party, or we don't invite folks to our house, or we aren't answering text messages at all hours. We say, hey, these are the hours that I'm answering messages and emails, outside of an emergency, this is when I'm available. And we start to put up some boundaries of, this is when I'm available. Here is, when you have access to me or not. This is going to also set that in motion that we're not just on a shorthand and you can get me whenever you need me. Now, it goes both ways. So if you're going to set that boundary, you've got to respect your team members' boundaries. And this is where I think a lot of us go wrong is we want to have boundaries, but we think of something at 9 p.m. and we're like, text to text, and we're expecting our team member to respond. And then we've sent a mixed signal. So think about what kind of boundaries that you want to set. It is going to be, a lot of this will relate to the industry you're in. If you work in events or in production, or a company like a gym or a med spa or salon where you have evenings and weekend work. Again, events and production has late night, last minute stuff that has to be figured out. All those sorts of industries, those jobs, those companies will have all different kinds of norms that are appropriate and expectations you can set. But I think the thing with the boundary is not only about time you're available, it's things that you can text versus Slack versus email about or call. Nobody calls anymore, but let's throw that one in there. If you have to, call out sick or have a last minute emergency, maybe it is a phone call so you can talk through it and talk about a coverage plan instead of a text, or something has to be requested instead of announced, right, in Slack. Those kinds of things are going to establish a little bit more formality that can be really helpful in not feeling like, oh, I don't want to be the bad guy, right? That's a friend zone feeling of, I don't want to upset anybody and I don't want to be mean and all these things. It's not mean to have boundaries, right? This is how we are actually able to scale ourselves, and your team members are going to want their own boundaries too. So this is going to be much appreciated across the board. So once we've framed this leadership conversation, once we've set these boundaries, now gonna rip the Band-Aid off, my friends. We got to have some hard conversations. The friend zone is synonymous with avoiding hard conversations, avoiding giving the hard feedback, avoiding doing the corrective stuff, like saying, hey, this thing didn't work, because we like the friendly thing and we like the vibe in the office, and we don't want someone to start to be grumpy or frustrated, or they're really important for this deadline and we don't want them throwing it off. You're a leader. You've got to face those things, even if they're uncomfortable. You've got to face it. If you're not sure if you're in the friend zone, the number one tell is if you are avoiding hard conversations. And again, this is real talk. I get that it's hard. But if you are not having the hard conversations, or you're sending someone to have them for you, and then maybe you're having a little bit of a different conversation, okay? I see this a lot. My business owners that have an ops manager or an office manager or a chief of staff, they're sending that person to really, hold the line, hold people accountable, and share the hard messages. Then when the team goes to them, that business owner directly, that founder directly, they're kind of good cop. They're the nice guy. And they're not operating consistently. And you are not setting up that chief of staff or office manager, ops manager for success if you're playing, friend boss when they've tried to hold them accountable and you don't have that united front. That's a signal that you're stuck in that friend zone. If something needs to change and it needs to be fixed, own it. Support that person. Empower your office manager. Empower them with having a consistent communication down the chain. If there's, let's say, a vacation policy that you want to enforce, or I have a client that someone on their team keeps asking for unpaid leave, like weeks and weeks of extra sort of vacation time because they are okay with it not being paid because they have other income streams. Well, that's not the whole point of the vacation policy, is to make sure there's coverage so that there's enough work getting done, right? So this has been a challenge. Now, if that's what the business owner feels, they have to say the same thing as the ops manager. When the ops manager shares that policy, if the team member comes back to the boss or the business owner and says, "Hey, can I take some unpaid leave?" They're like, "Yeah, I think you can." Whoa. You have just set both people up for failure because you're not enabling that person to be a leader. Now, I call that out specifically because that is one of the things I'm seeing, my friends. I'm seeing it every day that we want someone else to enforce some of our policies or deliver the hard messages. And then when we're kind of called on it, we don't say something consistent. And instead we're like, "Oh yeah, no, I don't know if that was a big deal." I hope when you're hearing this, you're realizing how problematic that is. Like I'm just going to say it. It's so problematic to do that because this is why a lot of times folks resent the ops manager or the office manager or the accounts team or the chief of staff, because you have this enforcer and you're not backing them up. Now, what do we do when we are trying to avoid friend zone, being a friendly boss, being the person that everyone still wants to come to, but we've also haven't disrupted this sort of flow across your team? Is we coach the enforcer how to deliver these messages empathetically, and we also deliver them empathetically, and they're the same message. And that means we've got to have hard conversations. Again, it's part of being a leader. It is what you signed up for. And the more you have these conversations up front, the more you give feedback, the more you are addressing things before they turn into bigger problems, the easier these hard conversations get. So this, my friend, is how we both recognize and avoid getting stuck in the friend zone. Because what happens when we're in the friend zone is we can't have the hard conversations. We can't give the feedback. We actually find we have lower psychological safety, right? People don't feel comfortable speaking up and taking risks because they don't want to rock the boat because everybody's in the friend zone. Now, when you shift that, you start to see, okay, it's easier to hold people accountable. People are actually stepping up more proactively. They're solving problems in a bigger way. It is game changing and such a freaking relief for you as a leader. All right. So remember, we want to talk about that leadership style. That's step one. We got to start the conversation, set and hold those boundaries. And then we have to have the hard conversation or operate in alignment with whoever else is having those hard conversations. Do those three things and you will be out of the friend zone and into a productive, positive place that is way more sustainable. See you next time.